Hello and welcome back to F1 Every Week. My name is Ben Wevel and today we're going to be looking at the fourth race weekend of the season, the Emilia Romagna Grand Prix at the Imola circuit. Imola's first appearance on the F1 calendar was in 1980 as the Italian Grand Prix in replacement of Monza, before a new race was established, the San Marino Grand Prix, for the 1981 season because of the popularity of Imola the previous year. During its stint of 27 seasons on the calendar was the infamous and tragic 1994 San Marino Grand Prix, in which both Roland Ratzenberger and Ayrton Senna lost their lives. This incident saw many revisions to the circuit made to improve safety and has subsequently progressed safety consciousness in F1 tenfold, in the hope that an incident such as this would never occur again. The circuit returned to the F1 calendar in 2020 under a new name, the Emilia Romagna Grand Prix, and returned this weekend for a third year under its new title. You can listen to the podcast on the streaming platform of your choice, including Spotify and Apple Podcasts, all linked below. Now, without further ado, let's get into episode 54. The Emilia Romagna Grand Prix would be the first sprint weekend of the season, seeing free practice on Friday and Saturday morning, qualifying on the sprint race on Friday afternoon, the sprint race itself on Saturday afternoon, and the race on Sunday. There were also a number of revisions made to the way in which the weekend worked. Instead of last year's system of points for the top three positions, every driver from first all the way down to 8th would receive points, with 8 for the victor and 1 for 8th place, making success in the sprint race even more integral to the World Championship this year, as well as the driver with the fastest time in qualifying being given pole position rather than the winner of the sprint race. Before the weekend had even begun, the drama had started, as Carlos Sainz confirmed that he had signed a new deal with Ferrari despite a turbulent first few races of the season. It was a less pleasurable week for Sainz's Ferrari teammate Charles Leclerc, whose $320,000 Richard Mille watch was stolen from him before the Grand Prix in Tuscany. The current championship leader will be hoping that this incident won't plague his mind during this integral weekend to come. Rain was on the weather forecast for the entire weekend, and FP1 saw full wets for most drivers. And despite Charles Leclerc topping the times, he had multiple incidents throughout the session. Spinning at turn 12 and 15, teammate Carlos Sainz also skimming over the grass at turn 15. Ocon, Norris, Stroll and Magnussen all slipped off the track at turn 15 as well, and the Williams teammates had difficult sessions in the wet. Albon going off at turn 7 and Latifi blocking Max Verstappen on a flying effort. Norris, Bottas and Alonso all had moments at Aqua Minerale, Bottas getting beached in the gravel and bringing out the red flag. And just like that, it was qualifying. The track had dried out somewhat after a very wet morning on Friday, and Leclerc set the early pace in Q1. But it was a far bumpier ride for Alex Albon in Q1, whose brakes caught on fire in the early stages, the Williams driver starting from the back of the grid for the sprint, as he did in Australia. So, knocked out with the stricken Williams of Albon, Esteban Ocon, who made his first early exit from qualifying since Mexico of last year due to a suspected power unit issue, Latifi, who is still yet to have made a Q2 appearance this year, and both AlphaTauris in P16 and 17, the team whose base is only 10 miles away, having had a torrid qualifying, which included Pierre Gasly's worst start since Turkey 2020. Q2 followed, and as rain clouds loomed, Carlos Sainz crashed out at Tosa, despite a positive P2 so far in the session, meaning yet another mistake for the Spaniard. This brought out the red flag, at which point the heavens opened, and the 5 who were in the danger zone found themselves unable to improve their times. These unlucky few were Stroll, Zhou, Hamilton, Schumacher and Russell. Mercedes putting in their worst qualifying performance here in 10 years, a testament to their lack of pace despite their great reliability. And finally was Q3, and it was Max Verstappen who took pole for the sprint qualifying on Saturday, with a blistering time that was just about within the 1:27s. But this time came after a plethora of red flags, the first due to Kevin Magnussen dropping it at Aqua Minerale. The Dane was able to recover, backing out for the gravel trap a few moments later. The red flag would fly once more, just after Max Verstappen set his pole time, due to an engine failure from Valtteri Bottas. The red flag came out for the fifth and final time in the final minute of qualifying, as Lando Norris spun out at Aqua Minerale, ending the session. So, behind Max Verstappen on the grid for Saturday was Charles Leclerc, who finished nearly 8/10 off the reigning world champion, just ahead of Lando Norris, whose late crash may have helped him seal his top 3 finish. Magnussen finished a phenomenal 4th, securing Haas's best ever qualifying finish, followed by Ricciardo and Red Bull's Sergio Perez, the Mexican underperforming compared to his emphatic pole of 2 races ago. Bottas recommenced his Q3 run in 8th, and Vettel made his first Q3 of the season in P9, and the unfortunate Sainz rounded out the top 10 for the Saturday sprint. Saturday morning saw FP2, in which George Russell showed a positive amount of pace in the Mercedes, despite the poor qualifying of the day before, setting the fastest time of the session. Mercedes teammate Lewis Hamilton, though, had a less positive second practice session, going over the grass at turn 14, despite the now dry weather. Max Verstappen, down in 7th, had a moment at Aqua Minerale. Teammate Sergio Perez having contrasting fortunes with the fellow Red Bull driver, the Mexican achieving P2. Carlos Sainz went off at the chicane at turn 14, as fellow Ferrari-powered driver Valtteri Bottas was unable to even exit the pit lane, his engineers working tirelessly to fix the issues on their Alfa Romeo throughout the session. Both McLarens faced issues in the final practice session as well, with Lando Norris having braking problems, but able to put in 6 laps. The same could not be said, however, for Daniel Ricciardo, who did not even exit the pit lane, his McLaren up on blocks for the entire session. The afternoon saw a dry yet cloudy sprint race in which Leclerc led away immediately, the Red Bull of Max Verstappen having a very poor start, and the Ferrari leading into turn 1. Perez got 2 places up in the first lap, as Alonso had a moment in the opening stages, letting both Perez and Ricciardo through. It was not long before the first major contact, as Zhou Guanyu was spun into the wall at turn 9 by Pierre Gasly, bringing out the safety car, which came in on lap 5. Leclerc leading easily away. Sainz, who made up 2 places on the opening lap, went around the outside of Fernando Alonso for another one at the Tamburello chicane, now up to P7. A lap later at the same spot, and it was Magnussen who was picked off by the fast-starting Perez for 4th. On lap 9, Bottas got Vettel at Tamburello, at that point only 1 place away from the points, before Magnussen, who started on the harder medium compound tyre, was overtaken by both Ricciardo and Sainz, again at the opening chicane. That area a prime spot for overtakes throughout the weekend on this tricky circuit to make passes. Perez passed Norris on lap 11 for 3rd, before Sainz pipped Ricciardo, splitting the 2 McLarens on lap 14. Schumacher moved up into the top 10 on lap 16, whilst Bottas made the move on Alonso for 8th. Up at the front, Leclerc began to struggle on his tyres, having pushed too hard in the early stages, giving Max Verstappen the opportunity to close up on the Monegasque late on. Whilst Verstappen closed lap by lap on Leclerc, Sainz passed former teammate Norris before Verstappen made the move for the lead in the sprint race and for the front position on the grid on Sunday on the penultimate lap. So it was Verstappen who won the first sprint race of the season, taking all 8 points, the Dutchman making a start in offsetting the early progress of Leclerc, who will start just behind. It was Perez who finished third, with Sainz making up 6 places in the sprint to fourth. Norris lost 2 places, but remained in the top 5, teammate Ricciardo just behind, and Alfa Romeo's Valtteri Bottas in 7th. Magnussen lost 4 positions to 8th, Alonso splitting the 2 Haas drivers. Russell was unable to improve, finishing 11th, followed by Tsunoda and the 2 Aston Martins, split by Lewis Hamilton. Ocon finished 16th, followed by Pierre Gasly, who has had a terrible weekend so far, and the 2 Williams drivers, Zhou the only unable to finish. Now for my driver of the sprint, and I have to hand it to Carlos Sainz, who had a poor weekend last time out, and I was concerned that this form will be repeated after his crash at the end of Q2. But the sprint race offers all drivers a second chance, and Sainz took it with aplomb, making up 6 places through daring moves into Tamburello. It could have been a lot worse. Next for my team of the sprint, and I have to give this one to Red Bull. Max Verstappen was able to convert his pole position into all 8 points, despite Leclerc leading for the majority of the sprint, and Perez made up for his disappointing qualifying with a 4-place improvement. Can they convert this form into a double Red Bull podium, even a 1-2? Keep listening to find out. Finally, for my struggle of the sprint, and I unfortunately have to give this one to Kevin Magnussen, who, despite having a very impressive qualifying session with a great P4, got the strategy all wrong, opting for the mediums rather than the favoured softs, and slowly dropped down the midfield to the final points-paying position of 8th. He should, hopefully, still be able to convert this into some more points on Sunday. The damp Emilia Romagna Grand Prix began on Sunday afternoon, and Max Verstappen led away well, Leclerc slipping all the way back to 4th, behind Perez and Norris. Sainz also had a slow start, and decided to go around the outside of Daniel Ricciardo, who spun the Spaniard out. Magnussen moved up to 5th, with Russell jumping up 5 places to 6th in the early stages. Vettel made up 4 places in the opening lap, Mick Schumacher dropping 7 due to contact at the first chicane. Tsunoda made an excellent start as well and jumped into the points. The safety car came out after the Carlos Sainz incident, the race restarting on lap 5, Max Verstappen leading away. Alonso dropped 2 places after the safety car, promoting Stroll into the points, before Hamilton did the same a lap later. The reason for Fernando dropping down the field was a large hole created in his side pod, the Alpine retiring on lap 7. Leclerc made the move into the podium places in favour of Lando Norris on lap 8, to the jubilation of the Tifosi. George Russell made the move on Kevin Magnussen at Tamburello on lap 12, but the Brit made a small mistake, Magnussen retaking the place before Russell broke into the top 5 once again later that lap, at the Variante Alta this time. Valtteri Bottas was the next to overtake Magnussen into Ravazza, the track slowly beginning to dry despite warning of imminent rain. Ricciardo was the first to pit for new tyres on lap 17, going on to the slicks, Daniel now a guinea pig for the use of the slick tyres, before Sebastian Vettel, Gasly and Albon all came in for the mediums as well. Perez was the next to pit on lap 19, also in favour of the mediums, before Russell, Bottas, Magnussen, Zhou, Latifi, Ocon, Hamilton and Tsunoda all poured in. Bottas had another torrid stop, an issue with the front right, and Hamilton and Ocon made contact in the packed pit lane. Lap 20 saw the race leaders Leclerc, Verstappen and Norris all pit, Verstappen coming out back in front, and despite Leclerc coming out in P2, Perez was soon able to overtake him. Hamilton lost out hugely after the first pit stop, dropping to 14th from 10th, Magnussen also having a poor pit stop period, dropping to 8th.